understand it intellectually. As I was studying physics at that time and began to study scripture much more seriously alongside finishing my physics degree. And then after that, went on to Regent College in Vancouver, BC, and then finally PhD work at Notre Dame. And then that led to my current position here at Quincy University.
5 on this one. That says a pretty mild winter, but the whole area. And when I read, but because of the steam coming up, but it's really quite comfortable. So that's been our habit pretty much every day. Even in Minnesota, here where I live, it's been cold. But when you have a hot tub, it makes up for it. So, well, let's get into it. We're in Genesis 2 now. Last time we recommended a theoretical read of the text that I'm going to play out. And again, you don't have to take this view as a listener. Again, the Divine Counsel worldview does not mandate a lot of reads on the text. There's many ways to go, and that's to be respected among anyone reading the text. But what I'm recommending as a possible read that, well, just for the sake of our discussion together here, makes sense to me is, and let's do it on screen. I'm going to share, again, our text here from Genesis chapter 2. The left side of the screen is the ESV, the middle is the New King James, and the right is the Hebrew. When we came to 2:7, after God had already created the world, or at least we're told about the world of animals, plants, and humans, in 2:7 we seem to get, I'd recommend another story, a following story. Then the Lord God formed the man of dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living creature. So now in my mind's eye, I have a human being that is possibly different from the other humans that have already been created, in the sense that this is a man of dust. So at least it's separated in the text in that way. That's all I know, right? Then we heard in 2:8 through about 14 that he puts him in a garden, and which is, again, in the ancient world, a paradisical idea that, a garden is a place that was made for human enjoyment, right? And so probably like a hobby farm where you have animals and plants and you tend and care for it, and it's your pride and joy. Interestingly, in this garden, we are told in 2:9 that we have a tree of life and we have a tree of knowledge of good and evil. So far, if you're reading the story, you don't know what those trees are for. You don't know what they're about. If you're living in Moses' day, by this point, as a reader, you would be familiar with the ancient idea that the tree of life is not a religious idea as much as a cultural idea, that trees breed abundance, and they're symbolic for abundance and sustenance and even reproduction. So maybe, again, if I'm listening to this at the knee of my father, I would have in my head an idea of a man wandering around in a beautiful garden, and he's got these two trees, and so far so good. They're both, tree of life, that's good. Tree of knowledge of good and evil, that's good. We'll talk about the meaning of knowledge of good and evil in a bit, because it's brought up, but so far so good. Anything more, Mike, that you want to bring in? Otherwise, I'm ready for 2:15. This is the setup now that we have. We don't have a woman. Excuse me. We don't have a woman in the hobby farm yet. We have a male. It sounds like the man of dust. We don't have any other person with him. Now he has animals, I would suspect, coming and going, and he sees them pairing up, males and females. But he doesn't see someone for him. Now, I'm getting ahead in the story because that's actually where it's going to go. So let's do it.
Well, actually, Ron, if I could just point out one thing that I noticed as well, right? Because this is not just the creation of, it's the creation of the garden, and it's not just the creation of those two trees, the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and bad, but that God created every tree. So there's lots and lots of trees in the garden. And I believe his name was Rusty Osborne. He was a guest on Mike's podcast, and he wrote a book called, I think, The Trees Are Kings.
Okay.
And it was his research into this idea that in the ancient Near Eastern context, if you are a king and you're trying to show other delegates and ambassadors who come to your nation how great of a king you are, you show them your garden. And what would even be more impressive of your garden is if you had trees that were from all the different regions and territories. I've heard of this.
Maybe I read his work or something.
That your kingdom has influence over. And so, like one of the most famous ancient gardens that we could think of are the gardens of Babylon, where the king had basically transported all of these trees from different locations, planted them in his garden to essentially say, hey, by the way, dignitary, this is how far my kingdom reaches because I have this tree that only exists elsewhere, like far, far West Africa, but I have it here.
Yeah,
and it just shows this is how far my arm goes.
Yeah, we have a golf course in our area. It's a private course. I've played it once with a friend who invited me, and we were walking the fourth hole or something, and there's a palm tree in the backyard of one of the homes. And of course, it stands out in Minnesota. You don't have those. And I said, what is that? And he says, well, the story behind that is he's so rich. Every year he plants a palm tree in his backyard, a full-size palm tree. He knows it's going to die. It's going to wither away in the winter. But the idea of I am wealthy enough, important enough to tell you, and you don't even know who I am, that I've got a tree from another part of the world that I plant every year. Yeah, that's a good point. That when we come to this story, it's not two trees. And by the way, they're not blinking, as far as my opinion would be, right? I was reading about this the other day, and one of the commentators called it a supernatural tree. Well, supernatural, what do you mean by that? Did its fruit blink? I doubt. All we have in the story is that we got these two trees that are special so far. And maybe they looked like other trees. We don't know, but this is a beautiful place. And let's see, thank you. Let's see what happens. 2:17. Is that where we left off? Yeah, let's do 2:17 or 2:16. The Lord God commanded the man, saying, you may surely eat of every tree of the garden. There it is, a lot of trees. But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that one specific tree, you shall not eat, for in the day you eat of it, you shall surely die. Again, this is just a curiosity to me. In Hebrew, when you want to say surely or indeed, you often just repeat the word twice. Yeah. So you will, in Hebrew, if you're reading over here, mot, tamut, you'll mot. If you eat that tree, you will die.
Yeah.
And so, well, that's an interesting, part of the story. Maybe God told him more than this. Maybe he explained it more carefully. Maybe he got actual direction, a sheet of directions as to what to do here. Can you touch it? I don't know. It doesn't say here. Eve will repeat the story later and add some stuff. But the point is, don't eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now, let's talk about the knowledge of good and evil.
Ron, if I could also just point out another emphasis, right? Because at end of 17, that you're right. There is the emphasis, the mot, the repeating of the verb again, or really a different version of the verb. But then the first emphasis in the command is actually at the beginning. And the ESV translates it kind of very lightly for some reason. But the first emphasis is actually, you will eat.
Okay.
It does the same pattern of the same verb being repeated again, but one is an infinitive and the main verb.
So and it's repeated. Okay. Yeah.
Like I know in other translations, like the NIV, they will translate it as "you are free," like to emphasize like you surely, you definitely, like you should, eat. This is what you should do. You should eat the fruit from the trees. Like this is your food.
For in the day you eat of it, it's almost that. It depends how you translate this, but it's almost like God is predicting, like a Deuteronomy 28, when you go into captivity. What? Here's, in the day you eat of it, which I kind of think, by the way, this does bring up the philosophical question. Why is God doing this? Why is God setting up a test in which who knows how long it took for Adam and Eve to blow it? But I remember asking that question in theology class when I was in college. I raised my hand. I love my theology teacher. I had grown to trust him to be a biblicist. He would look at the text. When you ask him a question, he'd often just open his Bible and start looking because he didn't want to give the pat answer. But I remember asking, how long do you think it took between the test to the failure? And he said, a couple weeks. And I said, where'd you get that? And he said, well, and then he gave some interesting points about, well, he does have Seth at a certain age, and da-da-da. In other words, you can kind of narrow it down, as it were, and he had some reasons. But anyway. Well, let's talk about knowledge of good and evil. We, of course, we know the story, but what is the knowledge of good and evil? My opinion, and again, give me your rebuttal here, Mike, if you'd want. It's a merism to me. A merism is where you, north and south, you name the bookends of something, Dan to Beersheba. You name the bookends, intending to include everything in between. So when I say good and evil, and by the way, those words in Hebrew are just the standard words, tov and ra. They're very normal words. They don't have any special divine meaning at all. So the knowledge of good and bad, again, this is just my opinion, and it doesn't I don't think it makes a difference to the story, so I want to tread lightly both in time and in intent here. That what the knowledge of good and evil will do, if you have it, is you will have a vast amount of information. Now, is that information you shouldn't have? We'll kind of figure that out later, that's it, that's the issue. But as a statement, the knowledge of good and evil to me just means you have wisdom, you have proverbial understanding, knowledge, intelligence. There's something you're going to gain here that on the face of it is a good thing. You will, and I think that's going to be coming into the temptation, which we'll end with in this edition, is when we get to 3:4 and we listen to, and 3:5, and we listen to the serpent talk, he is going to use this phrase, knowledge of good and evil, as something to be desired. It's not a bad thing. So that's all I want to say about that. Any thoughts?
So like I had mentioned, I think the last podcast episode when we talked, I had recently preached on this, like on Genesis 1-3, and one of the things I brought up with the congregation is that the typical use of the word tov or good, especially like Genesis 1 is like the clearest like case example of how tov is used in the sense of good, not in morality or good as in beauty, but good as in usability and order. There's organization. It's good. So when God creates things in Genesis 1, it's like, hey, this is good. Like light, that's a good thing. Ra, which is bad. Just so it could be just a bad result, a bad thought.
A tornado,
like
Ra.
Yeah, it's just Ra. like oh, he fell off the cliff. That was Ra.
Oh, that's Ra. I love the word because some Hebrew words just like onomatopoeia. They just have that sense of something just by saying the name or just by saying the word in Hebrew. You feel it, right? And Ra is one of them.
Yeah, in other cultures, like my mom, she had this idiom that she would say like "Mosan Bai Jilai," and that's in Toisanese, like a particular dialect in Chinese, and it means basically like what it sounds. It's a bunch of nothing. It's a bunch of silliness. Mosan Bai Jilai. It's like, and my Cantonese and Toisanese is terrible. Like my understanding is probably like at a 4 or 5 year old rudimentary level. And we speak English at home whenever I was with my parents. But that word, for some reason, my mom noted was like one of the most perfect pronunciations because some reason I could just say it.
Some Hebrew, yeah, that's a great point. Chutzpah in Hebrew, yeah. Liebskin in German. I was reading something or listening to something in German, and Liebskin, it's a young girl. Is that am I thinking right? In other words, some words you can't translate. There's meaning in the word that a boat is a ploion or whatever in Greek, and that works. But some words you just have to leave them in the original language because cherubim, right? You have to leave it in that language just to make let it flow. Well, so 2:17, as we come into the story, I think what God is saying, if I'm reading this the first time, I've got a guy who's got 2 trees. I'm told, it's implied I can eat the tree of life, right? Because he doesn't mention that here, but he says that tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that's the one you stay away from. Don't eat it. If you do, you will die. Now, what did that mean? I think it means exactly what it meant to the hearer, that he had seen death. That's my point. See, earlier I'd argued that coming out of Genesis 1, I think you have a rhythm of life and death in the plant and animal world, so that when Adam here is told, you will die, he knew what that was. He didn't have to be told. It means you're going to tip over, stop breathing, and become one of those things that you've seen on the side of the road. And that's the warning, right? Okay. 2:18, then the Lord God said, it is not good that the man, notice in Hebrew again, you have an article there, the man. So the word Adam is not yet used. It is not good that the man should be alone. So it's not Ra. I'm sorry, it's not Tov. Interesting, at the end of 1, God saw everything and it was Tov Tov. This is great. Now he admits, in the story, the same God admits, well, for this story of this guy in this hobby farm, it's not good that he's alone. And so what he does is I will make him a helper fit for him. Comparable is the word neged. So he's going to make, of all the animals that he's seen pair up, he noticed he didn't have one, so God is going to make one for him. Now out of the ground, verse 19, the Lord God had formed every beast of the field and every bird of the heavens and brought them to the man. Notice again in ESV, because the article is on Adam, the man is proper. Here's where the New King James makes an interesting, I just bring this up because it reminds us always, don't trust your translation. You always have to, in a sense, compare it to the original. Because every translation is an interpretation. For some reason, the New King James starts throwing in the word Adam or Adam. This is the first use of it, Adam. But we know it can't be Adam here because you don't put an article on a proper name. The David. They just didn't do that. So the ESV is doing it properly. He brought them to the man. Now again, is that a big thing? No, I'm just saying, notice how the 2 translations, and you could line up translations here if you wanted to, and notice how they're going to play this out differently.
Yeah, I do wonder on if they're, because they know what's coming ahead. Yeah, if that's part of the reason why they start changing it to a name, Adam, because, well, we're getting to who will eventually be called something else too. And so, but it is a really excellent point because, yeah, you can totally see the translation team decided, hey, I have a great idea. Let's take it.
And we all know this. Yeah, and I hope we all know the story behind translations. A translation is a group of people who have money, who can afford to do this, pay people to translate out of the original language, in this case Hebrew. That work is then sent to the general translation team. They have an editor that looks at it, they compare notes, they think about it, and they want to smooth things out, so that Genesis and Exodus agree, But the point is that if I was the general editor, I would have asked, in the New King James that came out in the late 70s, I would have asked my Genesis translator, why did you put Adam in 2:19, and I would have challenged it. I think I would have, and that's where the ESV did challenge that and say, well, let's go back to the man, because that's more fair to the text. But we're getting bogged down in in the text there. That's okay. So what does God do? Out of the ground, God formed every beast. He brought them to the man to see what he would call them. Now, again, the beauty of the story, in my understanding, is that you only have a certain number of animals that are on this hobby farm that Adam has to name. He's not naming every biped right in the world. And whatever the man called coal. Now, notice every living creature. Does it have the word coal? Each. I'm looking at my Hebrew to see if they're. Yeah, right there, coal, all. Coal can sometimes mean each, every, doesn't have to be every single one, much like in English or in Greek when it says that all Judea came out to see John the Baptist. It doesn't mean that every person came. It means that people from every walk of life, for example. So that's where this last phrase of 2:19, I don't take it to mean that Adam named every animal in the world. He whatever the man called every, in the sense of every creature that was around him, that was its name. So he gave these names, or these creatures, pet names, probably, and I don't know what they were. And I don't think he's naming them in the biological sense, giving them their biological names. He's just, Bill and Pat and Dominique, and he's naming them after a hobby farm kind of thing. The man gave names to all livestock and to the birds in heaven and every beast of the field. Of the field. Sadeh. In other words, this is the localized area that Adam was in. But, and here's the point of the story for Adam, and here's where the ESV makes the mistake in my mind, but for Adam, and they have a note there, or the man, notice in Hebrew, you can see it highlighted on the right side of the page, there is an article there, but for the man, there was not found a helper fit for him. So, verse 21, the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and while he slept, he took one of his ribs. That word is tzalah. It's used for side, even side rooms of like chambers in a temple. So it's not the biological. I mean, it may be his rib, but that's just a word we have traditionally stuck here. Took one of his sides, or his portion of his side, that's all we know, and closed up its place with flesh. And the rib that the Lord God had taken from the man, he made into a woman. So the man here is, by the way, that is Ha-Adam again. He made into a woman and brought her to the man. Then the man said, and this is the first use then in Hebrew of coming up in the next verse. Well, in fact, it's highlighted, so let me just read it. The man said, this is at last bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. This is the kind of being that looks like me. I'm looking at myself here. Bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. She shall be called Isha, because she was taken out of Ish. This is the first use of the synonym for man in Hebrew. You have Adam and you have Ish, are the two words that generally in Hebrew are translated as man. Adam often can be mankind, and in our story, he is the guy we're talking about. But when we get to 229, or 223, he throws out this proverbial statement, she shall be called Isha because she was taken out of Ish. So really it's just a curiosity to me that the woman's name is just the feminized ending or feminized version of the Hebrew word, which is a masculine term, Ish. And by anything that you want to throw out?
Well, so one of the things, so it was interesting, right? That whole entire moment of where God says he's going to, he takes a rib, or at least that's how the ESV would translate it. It takes one of the ribs. That really is I'm glad you mentioned it, that the word there is really actually just the Hebrew word for side, or the side of a building. And even the creation itself, I think the word for the actual making a woman is bara. It's the word for build.
Yeah.
And so there is that sense that he's constructing something. He didn't shape or form like he did with the Adam or the man. He's actually building someone who will become an Ezer for the man. Those words are just so pregnant with lots and lots of context and meaning. I would recommend, if folks really just want to dig deeper into what's going on with all those words, I would check out the work from Dr. Ingrid Farrell. I got to attend a seminar that she did at ETS, and she went full into what is the implication that woman is created from the side of man. And really this picture that's being painted of man and woman working together as one. As one race, as one unit. And just even the fact that she will be an Ezer, and how that word is typically used most of the time when it shows up in the Hebrew, it's associated with Yahweh.
Really?
Yeah, the idea that Yahweh will be my Azer, he's not just a servant, he's not just a
helper,
slave, not just like, the help, but like this is a partner, this is someone that is so strong that I essentially look towards for assistance, for deliverance, for help, because I desperately need the help.
Thank you for bringing that up, because some have said, here it is that, and again, what I did was I asked my computer to give me every occurrence of the Hebrew word for helper that's in 2:16. I will make him a helper, because it makes it sound in English as though she's below him. Yeah, she's my slave. But the word helper, when you ask the Hebrew Bible or your computer to give you every Hebrew instance of that word in Hebrew, you get 2:20, there's the word helper there. Look at Exodus 18:4. The God of my father was my Eitzor, my help.
Yep.
So whatever Eve was to Adam in the sense of helping him, God was to, who's talking in Exodus 16, Moses. So, yeah, I mean, we have, excuse me, we have helper, and it's used help many times. Eitzor is in Hebrew. But within the Psalms, it's almost always God. He is their help and their shield. So...
Yeah, and I think it's a really important point, because it's like it's not simply like we need to create someone just to assist Adam, to hold a basket while he's picking up fruit from the trees, right? It's like he needed someone eventually. If Genesis 1 and 2 are supposed to connect in some way, even if it's a loose connection, then it's like, how is this one Adam supposed to actually multiply? How is he supposed to grow and continue on? Well, he needs an equivalent. And so this woman is created as his Azer, and I love how you said, like, he can look at her as like almost as though there's a reflection, like she looks like me, but she isn't exactly like me.
And I'm sure you've had this in your ministry. I've done, by the way, as a pastor, I did probably a couple dozen weddings, and we would always have a time of counseling. My wife and I would both be part of that, and as we would counsel the couple, all four of us together, we would talk about this issue, because culture is oddly nervous about the idea, and properly so, that a woman would be seen as subject to her husband, stuff like that. And yet, in the Bible, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but the story of the Bible is that Paul himself will tell women to subject themselves to their husbands, as unto the Lord. And so those ideas don't often flow into a modern discussion. Well, I have married non-Christian people together, and I tell them about this, and they're shocked that the Bible would tell a woman to subject themselves to the male. And yet what we get into almost every time is we admit, and it's fun to let my wife do the talking on this one, obviously, right? Not me. But when the couple walks down the street, does the woman want the husband, the male, to walk closest to the road so that, the old story of if the car splashes the water, he will protect his wife from the spray, right? In other words, are there common sense? I was even watching with my wife, we like watching Married at First Sight, the Lifetime syndicated show. And these are non-Christians usually, and one couple for certain is not a Christian, I can tell. But she was offended when, during their, quote, honeymoon, which is, of course, they just met 20 minutes ago, but during the honeymoon, he didn't pick up her suitcase. And they were heading off to Mexico, and she even said on camera, I expected you to walk beside me and carry my suitcase. And he said, well, no, that's not what a guy does. A guy treats a woman equally. And she looked at him like he was from Mars. And I remember, thinking, aha, that's exactly the point, that just because we speak in terms of equality, it doesn't mean that there isn't bound within the heart of the woman and the man the desire to fulfill this kind of a story that we have even all the way back here in Genesis 2, that a man will look at a woman and say, well, you look a lot like me, but you're not like me. And I am, and now this gets into the rest of the biblical narrative, but I think biblical man, you and I as males, we both have a knowledge of, a conscience of, or a conscience that works this way, that we deep down know. Something's within our constitution that we are to protect our wife. We are to physically lead her and help her when she needs protection. I hope that doesn't sound,
wives submit to their husbands, but it's in a greater context within that passage. It's talking about also mutual submission, and that in the end, it isn't. I just remember there was one pastor who pointed out to a lot of us guys, if, let's say we go with the very traditional perspective of the wives are supposed to submit to their husbands. Well, husbands, if you guys don't really have a mission, in life. If you're just kind of flowing by and just doing your own thing and just sort of scraping by, if you don't have a mission, what is there for her to submit to bring herself under mission of with you, to partner with you? If you have no goal that you're going for, then
and I tell my premarital counsel couples this story. As a pastor, I've never had a woman come into my office and say, he's such a good leader. It's always the opposite. He says he's going to do something and he doesn't. He doesn't have a plan. In other words, what's interestingly bound up in the heart of in the human or the husband-wife relationship is, I think this is God-given, that the woman wants deeply to respect her husband. She has that desire. And the man deeply wants to love his wife.
Yeah.
The challenge is that, as Seneca, the old, the ancient Roman philosopher said, wherever humans show up, crisis is not far behind, right? The idea that when you put two people together who are not alike in every way, and let's get back to our text here, 223, she should be called woman, she's taken out of a man. In other words, we're setting up a story in which, wow, that's beautiful, and also, oh boy, here we go. This might get interesting, right? In fact, let's do this in 224. This is a great example. Let me read it. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife. They shall become one flesh. This clearly is stated as a midrashic look back upon this story as stated by someone who is living in their current situation, right? In other words, Adam didn't say, verse 24. Adam doesn't look up and say, therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and shall have his wife. In other words, this is a statement made by the writer looking back upon the story of 223 of Adam and Eve forming, and he's making a current discussion out of an ancient idea. Okay, now the reason I bring that up is because, and I'm going to pull it up on screen here too, this is what they call in Hebrew anyway, midrash. This is taken right off the myjewishlearning.com website. You can get this, you can Google it, Wikipedia, whatever. What is midrash? And I want to introduce it here because it's going to have a huge impact on how we interpret much of the Genesis story. Midrash in Hebrew is an interpretive act seeking the answers to religious questions, both practical and theological, by plumbing the meaning of the words of the Torah. In the Bible, the root D-R-S-H, darash, is used to mean inquiring into any matter, including occasionally to seek out God's word. Darash can be used to to search. That's commonly what darash is translated as. Midrash responds to contempt. This is the statement I like. Again, this is from a Jewish website, so they're not arguing theologically here. They're just saying, here's how Jewish midrash works. Midrash responds to contemporary problems and crafts new stories, making connections between new Jewish realities and, key, the unchanging biblical text. So the point is that when I say midrash, it's not a word that we often associate in Christian discussion about how to interpret the Bible, but I think it is it's hugely important to understand that when you talk about interpreting the Bible, the Jew has a standard way of doing, again, here it is, the word midrash. They will take an idea, let's do it, 223. Then the man said, this is Adam talking, this is bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh, she should be called woman, she was taken out of man. A midrashist will say, or a midrashic interpretation of this story will say, I like it. Let's keep it. We're not changing the meaning of the story. This is what Adam said. Okay, so we're going to keep the story. We're not changing its meaning. However, I live in a culture and in a world that's much beyond this one, and it has different challenges. It has marriage in it. Okay, now, again, Adam and Eve didn't get married, right? The text never says they were husband and wife. But what the midrashist does, or whoever put 224 in our Bible, they did a midrash on 223, and they said, let's apply that to you and I and our kids and how our world works. My daughter wants to marry this guy. What do I do? Aha, 223. A woman taken out of a man. Therefore, here's how you could, again, he's not interpreting 223, he's midrashing 223. And when he does that, he comes up with this idea. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, his Isha, and they shall become one. Beautiful idea, but notice it's not the meaning of 223, it's the current day, what do you want to say here? Help me, that they don't mean flippant, they mean fun, right? So you take a verse like 223, which is not about a man and a wife. It's about a guy realizing that what's standing in front of him is his comparable equal, okay? And that causes the midrashic idea of, hey, that will work for marriage. That's why when my son leaves the house and grabs this woman and off they go, they are fulfilling, and that word fulfill is interesting too. They're using Genesis 2:23 in their current daily experience. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there, that midrash will be a common way to interpret, or not interpret, to to have fun with in a respectable way, the inspired text.
Well, and then there is that interesting thing, right? Because in some sense, I absolutely agree. This is a reminder, right? When we're reading through the Genesis text, this is not a beat reporter who's like reporting right at a moment, like what's going on. Exactly. And it's not a meta moment where Adam turns to the camera and says, therefore, a man shall
exactly.
Right. But it's interesting that this verse, this midrashic, interpretation or just additional thought, or how do we actually understand this, or how does this apply and work in everyday living now? It's part of the inspired text.
And that good point. And I did want to get there, and you reminded me to get there. Jews take their midrashic interpretations as inspired along with the text. That's often what they'll do. And they'll say, and again, I don't think they're doing this wrongly. And this is personally my view also as a Christian, that I think Paul was doing this. Here's where this is going, by the way. Mm-hmm. Paul will midrashically interpret the Old Testament at times. He'll say the rock that followed them in Numbers 22 was Jesus.
Yes.
That's 1 Corinthians 10, right? And the interpreter today is made to say, what are you doing? How you mean, and so they want to go back into Numbers and cross off the word rock and put Jesus there. And Paul would say, if he was watching this, he'd say, no, don't change the story. I'm not saying Numbers 22 actually is Jesus. I'm saying in your current situation, living in Corinth, where you need daily sustenance, daily water, as it were, think of Jesus. There's a story. Remember our story in the Jewish world of the rock that gives them water? So that's what we mean by midrash. It's not changing the story. It's applying the story to current Corinthian life. So but we'll do that so many times coming up that we'll make our heads spin, but be ready for it. And that's, to me, the first midrashic statement of the Bible is Genesis 2:24. Maybe there's something previous to it, but at least that one jumps off the page. And 25, the man and his wife were both naked, arome, not ashamed. We've often wondered, again, what in the world's going on here? But my guess, based on how this is going to be used later, I think it's 3:10, that the ashamedness here is not to each other, it's to God. The man and the wife were both without clothing and not ashamed. You could put it in the positive. They were unashamed. They were proud, or they were, what's the opposite of shamed? They were pleased to be in the presence of the God that created them. And the reason I'm going to argue that way is because what happens later. They're going to realize they're naked and hide not from each other, but from God. So I think the naked and not ashamed just means, again, this might be a midrashic interpretation of the writer saying, by the way, guys, in this story, they're in the presence of their God, and you're going to see it coming up, and they're proud to be there. And sacred space will be a common conversation in the Divine Council worldview. This would be an example to me of where two human beings are in a position of being in sacred space with their deity, physically with their deity, and they're not cowering. They're not, shuddering like a Daniel 10 where he couldn't move. They're actually physically, again, what word do you want here? Proud or upright and fully suited for that place. That's, I think, what it means. I'm ready to jump into 3:1, and we'll get up to verse 5 as we close up this edition.
Well,
now the serpent.
If I can just add in just a little tease, because we did bring up Dr. Catherine McDowell last time we spoke. She has in her dissertation this very mind-blowing idea of, well, they weren't physically naked, but does that mean that they were not clothed?
What? Well, expand it. I'm not following.
So later on in her dissertation, she goes into a lot more of the ancient Near East context of how they would deify, or essentially open the eyes and ears and mouths of these idols, these statues of the gods. And part of that process is also this clothing of these statues, these gods, putting on them essentially like these glory clothes. That would be reminiscent of what the priests themselves would be wearing. And so they're like priestly clothes, but they're designed for the statues, because the priests are supposed to be almost like, representatives, in a human version image of the god that they're serving in particular. And so she brings that up later in her dissertation work. And it was so fascinating is there hints throughout later on in the scriptures that there was something going on? And certainly there's a lot of intertestamental Second Temple Jewish material that had this idea that Adam and his wife, or man and woman, were dressed in essentially glory clothes made of God's glory.
Oh, okay.
And so they were still naked because they're not physical clothes, but they were almost as though they were shining, but not because they themselves had light, but that they actually were surrounded by God's glory.
Well, and again, this is not rehearsed, but that's interesting you bring that up, because serpent, the next thing, this is where maybe the literary genius of the writer, Moses, is showing itself, because when you get the next line, not ashamed, of course, Then the next word is and. By the way, it's and, not now. It just can be a vav consecutive. And the serpent. Again, if you're hearing this as the first time reader, you probably had heard the story. So this is kind of like a retelling and putting it into, pen and paper. Here's what's happening. But you've all heard this story in your childhood. So that's why he calls it the serpent, the Nakash. The word Nakash is interesting because if you're watching this on screen, watch what I do. I'm asking my computer, give me every occurrence of the Hebrew term behind serpent. So there it is, serpent in 3:1, first mention of it. And then you get the 3:2 and the 3:4. So there it is. Notice on the bottom of the screen, Nakash is the translation. Serpents show up then, throughout the Bible. As I page down, Numbers, it's the serpent that Moses puts up to save the people from it's that bronze serpent, right? Venom of a serpent in the Psalms. Serpents are, here's a whole discussion. Charles Worth has a book on the serpent motif in the Bible. It's 450 pages. So again, I've not read it. I bought it and I haven't read it. But the idea is in the ancient world, serpents were akin to the divine world. There was a craftiness about them that led the word Nakash to be associated with omens, the divine world. Even the idea, as you just brought up, shining. Because here's what you can do, and I'm sure Logos can do this too. Do you notice above up here is, if you're looking at the screen, the word serpent at the bottom of the page, Nakash, H5175. That's the number that was assigned by James Strong to that Hebrew word Nakash. And again, by candlelight, he did the entire Old Testament vocabulary. He gave numbers to each word. So that when you ask your computer, I want to find every Hebrew word behind it, it just goes to that Strong's number. It's called H5175. And here it is up in the browser. If I put my cursor right there behind 5175 and I say, actually, I want to see what word is 5174. And you can do this with 76, 74, 73. You can kind of bounce around within words close to a word. In other words, it's going to give you a Hebrew word that's spelled almost exactly the same as in this case. It's just the vowel pointing of the word Nakash. Now, Nekash, just vowels, different. It's translated as bronze.
Yep.
And in fact, you get into the, this is actually the Aramaic, I suppose, because we're in Daniel, but the idea of, and you can back down, I think even 7:3, look at that, enchantment, omens.
Yep.
The point is, if you look around the word Nakash, let's go up to 7:6. No, 7:7. Now it gets into names, so we're not worrying about that. But if you work around that word, that's all I'm doing here, and pardon me for the specificity of that word study, but Nakash in Hebrew means serpent. There's no doubt about that. But the words associated with Nakash, and I don't have a list in my head. They often get into the idea of divination. So that when you hear the word as the first time hearer, you'll hear the word serpent, and you'll say to yourself, "Uh-oh, there's implications in that word, connotations behind that word that would make you, as you read the rest of the story, say, oh yeah, that's what serpents do." In fact, that's how the verse 1 goes. Now the serpent was more crafty. And again, I think the reader would have said, yeah, I know. That's how we've always thought of them. They slither. They're just crafty little guys. So let's read the story. Now the serpent was more crafty than any other beast of the field. And I think this is a local state, a localized, that word field there. So in that garden, and I'm sure by the way, notice I said Satan. Satan is not in the story. He's never mentioned. You have to go outside of the story, further down the biblical story before you'd ever associate Satan with this story. And that's fair. I understand why we do that. Genesis,
You're doing a little New Testament midrash.
Yeah, there's a midrash in New Testament, exactly. Romans 16, God will crush Satan under your feet shortly. Those kind of statements, I think, are midrashic callbacks to this story. But as far as this story, let's be fair to this story, and I think everyone listening would agree. It doesn't say Satan. And if you want to put Satan in here, you're going to have to do a little work to get him there. But for now, we just have this slithering thing. Do something, and let's watch what he does. He's more crafty than any other beast of the field that God had made. In other words, I think Adam knew, here comes this snake, and boy, he's a crafty little guy. I probably gave him a name. He said to the woman, notice we don't know what's going on here. It was, is Adam turning his back on her for a moment when he's doing the laundry? What's going on? We don't know. So let's not try to preach this or make a midrashic implication. I remember a whole sermon that I had in my junior high memory of, here's what happens when men are not, or how'd it go? if you let your wife go off on her own someday and don't be with her and take care of her, here's what she might do. Well, pretend you never heard that, okay?
Well,
He said to the woman, did God actually say, you shall not eat of every tree of the garden? Right? That's back in chapter 2. The woman said to the serpent, and again, we're just going to set this up at the end, for our podcast here, and we'll pick it up next time with what happens. The woman said to the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden. Fair enough, that's implied from chapter 2. But God said, again quoting Eve here, you shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the midst of the garden, neither shall you touch it, lest you die. We've often wondered, and since I was in junior high myself, I wondered, where did she get this idea? Because if you go back to 17 or so, God never told them not to touch it.
Yep.
She's implying the tree of knowledge of good and evil here, right?
Yeah.
So where do we get that? And I don't know what you think, Mike. I think she is simply, and I'm not impugning her. I don't think we need to. I would just say she's giving her best response and saying, well, whether God told us not to, we've made the decision we're not even going to touch it. And so she's just in general indirect quotation sense here, which they don't have quotation marks in Hebrew, so you have to always take these things as indirect quotation. She's just reliving the command as best she knew, and I find no fault in it. Is that fair enough? What do you think?
Well, so like I said before, I just had preached on this last a few weeks ago, and so what I did with the audience was I simply took, here's what God actually said in chapter 2, and I just left it on the screen. And then side by side, I would actually show, so this is what the serpent said that God said. So it's like his version of what God said. And then highlight the same words that are similar, are the same in Hebrew. And people would, over time, they realize, wow, the majority of these words don't match up.
Oh, really? So back in 3:1, you're saying that doesn't match?
So like he skips like that. That was why earlier when I mentioned don't miss out the first emphasis, which like other translations like the NIV will say you are free, which is their way of saying you will eat like eat all you want. Like this is what I really want you to do, which is be appreciative and just enjoy the food that I've provided for you in this garden. There's so much food. Eat. Just don't eat one fruit. Just one. That's it.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. But the overall sense is you have freedom to eat from everything I made, because guess what? I made it for you.
Yeah.
But
and Satan, the serpent doesn't do that here.
Yeah. He focuses on on the negative version of the words, but he doesn't even quote it correctly. Right. He says, "You shall not eat of any tree in the garden," meaning so you're not supposed to eat any of the fruit from the trees, which is completely contrary to what God's intention. And so I kind of noticed that it's interesting because the serpent sets up the pattern of focus on the prohibition, not on the granted freedom.
Thank you for doing that, because this is how Midrashic interpretation in the Talmud works. That Jews who revere this text and the entire Old Testament, right? They take this kind of story, and much of the Talmud is unpacking what you did there in the last minute or two. They do it page after page after page, and they're doing it out of respect. Deep respect for the text. And so what you're doing with your audience when you preach the sermon is you're respecting the text enough to take your time and looking at it word for word, saying, do you see it? Do you see what this serpent is doing? So that was a good point. What I would say, just as a reminder, and I do this with myself all the time, keep midrash. Don't, Ron, don't take your, and I'm talking to myself here, Mike, not you. Don't take your spin on a text and turn it around to equal the text. Keep the text, and your spin. And possibly maybe you're doing it right, maybe you're doing it wrong. And at least what you're doing with the Midrashic interpretation is you're always leaving the story in place. And we'll get, this will be for next episode when we get to 3:15 and, the seed of the woman crushing the head of the serpent. That is ripe for Midrashic interpretation. And so we'll talk about that when we get there. But that's what you're doing here. You're thinking with the text, you're having fun with the text, you're totally, respecting the text by doing that with your audience. So let's finish up with just where the serpent and the woman end up here. The woman said, we may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God said, this is again what I'm taking just to be her rendition of what her and Adam decided to do, is to not even touch it lest you die. And here's the famous statement that, again, notice how our different versions will handle it. The serpent said to the woman, you will not mote. You will not die. You will not surely die. For, and here's where you wonder Is he telling the truth, or is he, I mean, there's various options here. Is he lying directly? Is he spinning the truth? Is he whatever? Let's just hear it. God knows. Elohim knows. And that verb is, if you're looking at the very bottom, singular. So the noun Elohim here, again, in my mind, I never say the word God. I just have taken that word out of my English vocabulary. I read this in my head as, for Elohim knows, and that's a singular verb, that means this is a singular Elohim. Okay, so that would be Yahweh. That's how I think it in my head. For Yahweh knows that when you eat of it, that's the tree of knowledge of good and evil, your eyes will be opened. That's a good thing. And here's that, and I put it in yellow just because it's a talking point. You will be like Elohim, knowing, look at the bottom there, plural, good and evil. This is where does the knowing in plural as a participle, does it go to the good and evil, or does it go to the Elohim? Here's where, look across to the New King James in the middle, you will be like God, capital G. So the interpretive call by the interpreter or the translator of the New King James Genesis Project thought this idea was that the serpent was tempting the pair to be like Yahweh. If you eat that tree, the fruit, you will be like Yahweh, knowing good and evil. Now notice that's New King James. If you go back to the Old King James, and I'll just pull it up here and put it equal. This is, the Old King James of 1611. Here is your Old English. For God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods. The original King James took that as a plural.
Yeah.
Knowing good and evil. So all I'm saying is, and again, you can play out your different versions here. I wonder what the Legacy Standard does. They have God. Okay. So I'll just go back to, I wonder the ASV is based on, the ASV is 1901. And
the ASV is like, it's like the King James, but like updated to more American
updated
style.
King James, 1901, yeah. So what they did, ye shall be as God, so they're going to go with the Yahweh idea, but then they put in a footnote, look at the bottom, or gods. They admit you're going to have to make an interpretive decision and move on. And so my point is, and again, I cannot emphasize this strongly enough for our Divine Council Worldview listeners, the Divine Council Worldview as a concept always has you, number one, thinking in terms of the original reader and writer. Number two, and that's a subset to number one, is when in doubt, remember every English translation is an interpretation. It's always interpreting. It has to. It's not a fault of it. It's just what we have to do. And so what the problem is that when you're sitting in a Bible study at church or something and you come upon this verse, if half the audience has, let's pull it up again. And let me throw this out there to you, Mike, and see, well, you know where I'm going. So if half the audience has an ESV and the other half has a Old King James, what's the difference between these two verses?
God versus gods.
Yeah, that's a completely different temptation to Eve.
Yes.
So here's the question. Was she tempted to be like Yahweh, or was she tempted to be like the serpent? In other words, was she tempted to become like what she has probably witnessed in the garden? God's host, God's divine beings, that in some way, because she's made in their similitude, she's made like them. So she's probably had conversation. That's why she's not running away from the snake, I think. I think she's had conversations with these beings before. I don't know, and I'm giving away my answer, but any thoughts there?
I agree with you. And in that sermon, I quoted the text and then I put in brackets, better translated gods. Like I can look out to folks in my church, and I'll notice every so often when I say that kind of thing, some heads will tilt because it's
welcome to our world, right?
Yeah, like welcome to the strange world of the Bible, where all of a sudden there's this statement to a human woman, and actually another thing, this is like an earlier point, right? The whole entire conversation that the serpent begins, he doesn't use the singular you, he uses the plural you. And then she also uses the plural us and you as well. So like that also was the differences that we noticed when I was taking my church through what was going on with the text, is that, like some theologies, and this is on the side, right? Part of what I do when I make the sermons is I also will make slides. So I'm looking at pictures for like images of like man and woman and the fall and that kind of thing. And I didn't put it in, but it really ticked me off. I saw this picture of a guy, this guy basically made this picture of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and it's like a silhouette type of picture. And so it looks like a giant oak tree. And on the right side of it is, you can see the little squiggly like silhouette of a serpent. and a little mark for like a fruit, and then a woman reaching for the fruit, like all in silhouette. And on the far left of the tree, like on the other side of the page, is man, also in a silhouette. Yeah, and the implied, messaging of the image was that man wasn't there or wasn't hearing any of this conversation that was happening between the serpent and the woman, as though like, oh, hey, like I'm bringing some fruit for you to eat, and then man would just like eat this because he didn't know what was going on.
When she spends time on her own, she gets
but
I've heard that so many times. Yeah.
At least this is how and maybe this is a more interpretive, but the fact that the conversation between the serpent and the woman is including the plural you, and it's clearly in the text of the grammar.
Oh, okay, good point.
Then doesn't that mean that the man was there? It maybe not participating, not saying anything, but he was listening in. He was the one that heard the original command. And so,
right, and thank you. So next time when we, for our next podcast, when we talk about what happens, right? So we're going to stop here and then pick it up with next time. So when the woman saw, and then there it goes. There's the quote fall, right? So we'll do that next time. But I appreciate your point that even that silhouette image of subconsciously saying, here's, that Adam left her alone. Guess what happened, and, no, I think he was there. And Paul will do a midrash on this in 1 Timothy and say the woman was deceived and the man rebelled, whatever. I don't take that to mean that Paul, for the first time in Ephesus in whatever, AD 62, when he wrote Ephesians, he finally clarified for the watching world what happened in Genesis 3. I just don't think he's doing that. I think he's doing what a Jew does, and that is have fun with the text in a respectful way and play out a situation in Ephesus that he wanted to teach based upon this text here. So, but we'll let that go. Okay, in fact, let's close up this podcast with, again, just where we are. What I think is happening is the old King James, I think, gets it right, that the temptation of the serpent to the woman and Adam was, you know what I'm like. I know good and evil. I have this encyclopedic wisdom and knowledge of things. Again, I'll just leave it very general for now. I have this ability to think and reason and know, and it's beyond you guys. If you eat of this tree of knowledge of good and evil, that's what you'll get. You'll be like me. You'll be like a God. You'll be like a divine being. You'll be like an Elohim. So I think that was the temptation. In fact, as we close, Mike, I'll let you give your opinion. Why do you think modern versions, and God bless the ESV, I'm not opposed to it, it's a good version, but why do you think they went with capital G-O-D? In your opinion, that's not a leading question. I'm just honestly getting your opinion.
I think there's several factors, right? I think there's it's like going back to that earlier issue of like, why do we translate that one Hebrew word rib when all the other times it's translated as side of a building and something like that?
Yeah.
Right. It's almost like the weight of English translation. It has so much momentum. It's slowing down because now we're actually examining the texts more carefully. But that tradition of how folks back in the 17th century translated the English text into the English language and how integral it was, that kind of background tradition, this knowledge, this weight and momentum is still moving forward. And so I think there's that little bit of that pressure that is happening here. And also it opens that whole entire can of worms of like, you're just doing a normal Wednesday night Bible study. And then if they put in the word gods, that just will open up into a big conversation. And is that something that
my Bible says that?
Yeah, and so like I guess that's also the other question is like, is that the purpose of a Bible translation? Is to cause everyone to get into an argument?
No, I was hoping you'd have a better end to that question, but my experience as a pastor was again I work for a bank now. I spend 8 hours a day enjoying my fellow workers. We don't talk about the Bible at all, except when we get on phone calls and we talk about life. It's funny how everyone deep down has spiritual thoughts, and it's been just a blast to work with non-Christians. From what I know, I can sense they're not a believer, but boy, do they have deep questions that are just like mine. We're on the same page on so many things, and that's been a blessing in that sense to move away from ministry, full-time ministry, and do it now like this. This is how I do my ministry. It's just on the side. But anyway. What was that? Where was I going with that? The purpose of Bible study. I always hoped, I had this romantic idea that as a pastor, I'd sit in a room and I would, talk through the Bible and everyone would say, what's the Hebrew word behind that? And blah, blah. And it was, well, it's not that way. Generally, people are looking at their English Bible thinking this is what Moses said. And the idea that Moses didn't speak English is throwing a wrench into something that usually is too much for the room to handle. And it's sad because you want it to go there, but it's just not part of the conversation. So anyway, we'll leave it there and look forward to next time. Thanks again, Mike. And everyone have a wonderful time with your Bible study. Continue reading ahead of us, and we'll see you next time.
as I was studying physics at that time, and I began to study scripture much more seriously alongside finishing my physics degree. And then after that, went on to Regent College in Vancouver, BC, and then finally PhD work at Notre Dame. And then that led to my current position here at Quincy University.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And that, I remember reading the story that you mentioned about your own coming to faith, or just kind of what
Well, I tried to repress it, then I carried its crown. I reached out to undress it, and love let me down. Love let me down. So I tried to erase it, but the ink bled right through. Almost drove myself crazy when these words led to you. And all these useless dreams of living alone, like a dogless bone. So come let me love you. Come let me love you, and then color me in. Well, I tried to control it and cover it up. I reached out to console it, but it was never enough. Never enough. So I tried to forget it. It was all part of the show. Told myself I'd regret it, but what do I know about all these useless dreams of living a dogless bone? So come let me love you. Come let me love you, and then color me in. Come let me love you. Come let me take this through the end of all these useless dreams of living. All these useless dreams. All these useless dreams of living. All these so come let me love you. Oh, come let me love you. Come let me love you. Come let me, yeah.
Capoeira is a form of martial arts from Brazil, and it's infused with dance.
Come now through all of it, downtown and Tenerife, through dark clouds all circling our house like a tourniquet. When the front door splinters in, you come down the hall unfaltering, your lips licked and shimmering, leaning in and I'm vanishing. I close my eyes and you are it's just a dream. It's just a dream. It's just a dream until you see it happening. In the plaza afterwards, I saw you rise up out of your collared shirt. On the horizon, there was another world. We left the phantom and we ran for her. I close my eyes and we're alive. And it's a blinding light. It's just a dream. It's just a dream. It's just a dream. But it's just a dream until you see it happening, and then it changes everything. Couldn't we make it just like we want it, just like we need it? Why can't we just like a who says we can, who says we can, who says we should, who says we could and make it just like we love it? Why can't we just like a dream? It's just a dream.
Well, I don't know if I'm wrong, she's only just gone. Here's to another relationship born by my excellent breed of gamete disease. I'm sure when I'm older I'll know what that means. She cried when she should, she laughed when she could. Here's to the man with his face in the mud in an overcast place, just taken away from the lovers in love at the center of stage. Yeah, loving is fine, if you've plenty of time. Yeah, for walking on stilts at the edge of your mind. I said loving is good if your dick's made of wood and the dick left inside only half understood. What makes her come? What makes her stay? What makes the animal run away? Yeah. What makes him stop? What makes him stand? And what shakes the elephant out? And what makes him mine? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. No, I don't know. Yeah. Anymore. No, no, no. I love her indeed. I was covered in weed, and she cried when she should. She laughed when she could. Close to God is the one who's in love. I walk away 'cause I can. Too many options may just kill a man. Loving is fine if it's not in your mind, but I've fucked it up now. Just too many times I said loving is good if it's not understood. But I'm the professor and I feel that I should know just what makes her call, what makes her stay, what makes the animal run away, what makes him tick apart from his wit, and the lonelier side of the jealousy stick. I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. No, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. No, 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 I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. No, 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 no. And I don't know, yeah, or me anymore. I don't know, no, no. Oh, yeah. Hey, 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 hey. See, I don't know if I'm wrong, just 'cause she's only just gone. Well, here's to another relationship born by my excellent breed of gamete disease. Finished it off with some French wine and cheese. La vie danse quand elle joue avec moi, et je pense que je l'aime des fois. Le silence n'ose pas, dis donc, quand on est ensemble, mettre les mots sur la vie danse quand elle joue avec moi, et la pluie me montre quoi. Non, non, c'est la chanson, la nuit, le vent, l'amour, le sang. D'un petit
God of creation, there at the start, before the beginning of time. With no point of reference, you spoke to the dark and fleshed out the wonder of life. star, a signal fire of grace. If creation sings your praises so loud, so loud. God of your promise, you don't speak in vain, no syllable empty or void. For once you have spoken, nature and science follow the sound of your voice. And as you speak, 100 billion creatures catch your breath, evolving in pursuit of what you say. If it all reveals in nature so alive, I can see your heart in everything you say. Every painted sky, a canvas of your grace. If creation still obeys you so loud, so if the stars were made to worship so loud, if the mountains bow in reverence so loud, if the oceans roar your brightness so alive, for if everything exists to lift you high, so alive, if the wind goes away, send it so alive, if the rocks cry out, silence so alive, the sound of all our praises still fall shine, then we'll sing again 100 billion times. God of salvation, you chased down my heart through more than my faith and pride. On the hill you created, the light of the world, abandoned in darkness to die. And as you speak, 100 billion failures
We've wanted to be trusty and true, but feathers fell from our wings, and we've wanted to be worthy of you, but weather rained on our dream, and we can't take back what is done, what is past. So fellas, lay down your fears, 'cause we can't take back what is done, what is past. So let us start from here. We never wanted to be lusty or lewd, nor tethered to prudish strings. We never wanted to be jealously tuned, nor withered into ugly things. And we can't take back what is done, what is past. So fellas, lay down your spears, 'cause we can't take back what is done, what is past. So let us start from here. That you are is not all you desire, then come. Come alone, come with fear, come with love, come however you are, just come. Come alone, come with friends, come with foes.
like a green traffic light up ahead. I'm coming, I swear. Just gotta comb my head, push my way through the crushing weight on my chest. But I won't go back to all that trouble I've been through. I won't go drag you into the shadows I know too well. Someday I'll get out of my own way, baby. Out under the morning breaking somewhere. Out there, step away clean and empty. Start again like I'm meant to be. Free and easy. It's a new name and everything. And it's more than a dream. I hear your voice in the street. Through the ink of the night, it's like colors that I've never seen. And I need to be in it, lifted clear from my bed, and finally stepping in the right direction again. No, I won't go back to all that trouble I've been through. I won't go sweat to you someday. I'll get out of my own way, baby. Out into the sunlit pavement somewhere. Wind in my head. Step away clean and empty. Start again like I'm meant to be something so much better than it. Yeah, you know I gotta stay ready. Start again like I'm meant to be. Free and easy. With a new name and everything. Don't know what you call me, but you can call me. It will that half of the bed empty like a page. All the cursive claims you read. to make. Oh, the promising lines bending like a spine. Oh, the whiteness that your pen could write. If you get these bandages off, you can stand, you can walk. Leave these towels and gauze. You get up, you get out into the sun. That's where we belong. Been a bit too long. All our weaknesses are growing strong, and the winter always ends with water on your lips. The April rain comes swinging in. Get these bandages off. Let me stand, let me walk. Leave these towels and gauze. Let me up, let me out into the sun. Come, she will. Come, but you'll make it right. You don't want pity, you want pride. A king, a lion, a god, a woman, and children who cry when the thunder begins. Their heads fall to their chest. Would you watch